shoots one shot, kills his target. Estimates range, but around 200 meters. And then escapes, and nobody sees him. So in any investigation, you let the facts take you where they take you. You don't make any presumptions. And again, indicating that this is a sophisticated individual. One shot, hitting the target from 200 meters away, and then escaping without anybody seeing them. Those are the hallmarks of a professional.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. That was former New York State Senator and Homeland Security Advisor Michael Balboni, whom Fox News describes as a security expert weighing in on the Charlie Kirk assassination. He did so on 11 September, but I guess he either hadn't seen the news by then or, if he had, didn't think much of it. Because, of course, as we know, the shooter was seen several times, and that's hardly the mark of a professional. Has anyone here read the book The Day of the Jackal? Anyone watched the series? That narrative is what a professional assassination looks and feels like. I think a movie like Wanted, despite its hyperbole, stresses an entirely different point about professional assassins. It's that they can hit a target from an almost unfathomable distance. By that measure, those who are claiming that Charlie Kirk was shot from the side, well, that would be even closer than the identified sniper's nest. Not much of a shot then, if he needed to be that close. And besides that, he must have had a round capable of boomeranging in some way in order for it not to perforate the tent Kirk was sitting under, and bear in mind he was sitting close to the middle. But there's a far more obvious reason this wasn't a professional sniper, and that's the number 11 clue everyone missed. The point of impact, which I won't show here, but many have clearly seen, tells us everything. It hit the target, yes, but like the Thomas Crooks shooting, it almost missed the target. But before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. By the way, just a reminder that there's a new series coming to, I think it's Disney, and starting on the 15th on October. It's also on Hulu. It's called Murdaugh, Death in the Family. As many of you know, I covered that trial and investigation on this channel, and I'll put a link to the playlist, the Murdaugh playlist, in the description. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, please do hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So the number 11 clue everyone missed was this point of impact. What does that tell us about the shooter? Does it really tell us that we're dealing with a professional sniper, or does it tell us something else? You know, just a few inches high and the bullet would have sailed right over Charlie Kirk's shoulder. I don't know whether the shooter was aiming for the head or the heart, but either way, he missed. Perhaps because of his training as a hunter, and perhaps because of what happened in the Thomas Crooks attempt, the shooter aimed for the torso. Although he struck it, he very nearly didn't. And because it was off target, for a short period of time, Charlie, as far as I know, actually survived the shooting. I think two additional reasons we can clearly see it's not a professional sniper is how he botched the forest drop. This must be one of the dumbest errors not just an assassin can make, but any murderer using a firearm. It's leaving the murder weapon at or near the scene and allowing law enforcement to find it and take it into custody. And what happens when that happens? Not only do you have the murder weapon, but you have the fingerprints, DNA, all of these other evidentiary items, including the rounds that he engraved on, associated with that evidence as well. Besides that, as we know, the firearm used was not typical. It was a lot older than usual, and I think its serial number will demonstrate that basically, or even lack of serial number, basically that we're talking about a World War I or II era firearm that has been modified to some extent. Also, I think the fact that he mentions in his text to his friend about the scope, and the fact that a scope was used, that's likely going to tell you a lot as well. Many people have inferred that the use of the screwdriver was to disassemble and reassemble the firearm. As far as I'm concerned, the use of that screwdriver was to simply attach that scope, which he said would cost $2,000. That's another thing. If you can check that scope and it does cost $2,000, once again, you're verifying the authenticity of the story of the shooter. Now, coming back to this idea of the murder weapon actually being found at the scene, is that very often? Is that something we come across very often? In the Murdaugh case, and by the way, as I say, new series dropping on Disney this week, I believe on the 15th. In that case, the murder weapon, the gun that killed Maggie and the firearm that Paul was murdered with, they were never found. Do I have that right? It says here, the guns used to kill Maggie and Paul Murdaugh were never found. Prosecutors allege that Maggie was killed with a .300 blackout rifle and Paul was killed with a 12-gauge shotgun, both of which are described as family weapons. While the specific 12-gauge shotgun was reportedly in Alex Murdaugh's possession when the first deputy arrived on the scene, the assault-style rifle used to kill Maggie and the replacement for Paul's stolen .300 blackout rifle have not been recovered. Now, I must say, the fact that two different firearms were used does suggest, almost in a way, two different shooters, doesn't it? In fact, the shooting looks and feels to me, this is in terms of the Charlie Kirk case, exactly like the sort of thing that took about a week to plan, which is to say, not zero planning, but also not much, certainly not nearly enough. One has to wonder what mixture of media and internet slush informed this shooter's mindset and motive. What was he fueling his interior monologue with, or basically his interior psychology with? In the 2008 movie Wanted, the false and frankly criminal ruse of taking control and fulfilling one's destiny is depicted by someone who follows in his father's footsteps, while this is where his father is an assassin and then he becomes an assassin.
This is me taking back control of my life.
It may seem that way, and it may seem that way in particular to gullible 20-somethings. It may even feel that way, but really it's the opposite. Anytime someone picks up a firearm to expressly shoot someone else, it tends to be about losing control, especially since what follows is a whole long epilogue of not only not being in control, but not even being free.
What did you think was going to happen?
In the real world, the next page of that story is arrest, and then pages and pages up until the end of the book, which deal with a long date with the four walls of a prison cell. If this was a professional sniper and someone formed part of some sort of faction, one can imagine several people being involved, including someone driving a vehicle, someone taking the weapon and dismantling it, and someone neutralizing the cameras, none of which happened here. The FBI feel that this was a lone wolf who was radicalized online. You may not believe that, but certainly the type of shot doesn't seem to support a professional sniper, and so the number 11 clue we all missed does show, I think, a very strong reinforcement for this idea that we are dealing with someone who wasn't a professional sniper, someone who was a lone wolf, someone who didn't really know what he was doing, and someone who was caught very quickly afterwards as a result of all that. Does that make sense? Well, I'm not going to take it further than that, except just to say that I think the bullet found in Charlie Kirk's body is going to be matched to the firearm used, and the firearm is then going to be matched to Tyler Robinson. If it is, that is going to show unambiguously that he was the shooter, and I'm not quite sure where the conspiracy theorists are going to be able to wiggle in terms of that. Is it then the court process that is corrupt, or is there some conspiracy at that level? In any event, we've got to still wait and see for some additional evidence to come out. The search warrants and, of course, the trial is still upcoming as well, and we'll be looking out for that. All right, thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.